Rivals.com, we are back. We're going to talk transfer portal today. I brought in basketball recruiting director Rob Cassidy. Rob, I kind of want to talk about, like you said, like the guys in the portal. I know you have an article that just came out talking about the freshman year. Let's start off with Bronny James, USC, kind of the NBA draft, the portal. Like, what's going on? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, the story is actually about guys that kind of had disappointing freshman years as compared to the high school rankings that I think could benefit from a change of scenery now that they're in the portal. And Bronny's one of them, but he's an interesting one. And as you know, everybody is very normal and measured when they talk about Bronny James on the internet, so I'm sure nobody will be weird about him. But he's interesting because a lot of people think he's going to stay in the draft, and he very well may. You know, his dad in Clutch Sports has the kind of stroke to get him picked in the late rounds, possibly. The Lakers have a late round pick. Who knows what happens with that? Kristen Peak, who covers the NBA draft for us, seems pretty convinced that he's going to stay in there, and he probably will. You know, Kristen's very plugged in. I just don't know if it's good for him to stay in there. You know, if we're talking about what's best for Bronny, I think when people talk about him, they either take this is not an NBA player, and he's just gotten to where he is with his dad on this side, and he's ready for the NBA right now, and it's in the middle, as most things are, you know, but, you know, there's no room for nuance. I think that he could benefit for another year in college and change scenery. Maybe he gets more used to the pace of the college game. Remember, he had a heart attack at the beginning of the year, which stunted his development. You know, I mean, this is a kid that didn't play for a few months. I think that there's still a chance for him to find a role in the NBA. I don't think he's ready for it right now, though. I think he could be a 3-and-D type guy in the NBA. But the reason that college basketball is there, at least used to be there, was for development. And if a kid needs the development, I would, if I was a Bronny James advisor, I would advise him to go back to school, wherever that is, for one more year, because I think he could really take a huge step between his freshman year and sophomore year, much like the one that he took between his junior year and senior year in high school.
So I was going to ask, what would be some of like the top schools that you think would be the best fit for Braun if he decides to come back?
Well, you know, I think he's a high level. I think he's a high major level kid if he wants to be. I think there are plenty of schools out there where he could find a role. But I think, you know, obviously people are going to talk about Duquesne because his father's coach and his father's friend is now the head coach at Duquesne. Whether or not there's any truth to that, who knows? But the logic is there, and I can follow it. At least LeBron would know, you know, who's kind of in charge of his kid and, you know, knows his tendencies. But I think there's any number of schools he could play for. You know, I don't think that he is, you know, definitely a mid-major level player or anything like that, even though he would shine at Duquesne. You know, Ohio State would be one that comes to mind, I think, since he's got ties to the state of Ohio, obviously, and, you know, the Columbus area. But there are many, you know, there are a ton. You know, I guess he probably won't start looking at that until he gets some feedback from the NBA on what they think about where he should be. And then we can kind of start talking about college options if he does decide to come back, which people more plugged in than me on the NBA side seem to think is unlikely.
For the NBA interest, what position do you think Bronny's really going to like thrive at? Because he's kind of like that in between, like guard, he kind of wants to play like a forward, but he's a guard. But it's like
got to be a 2 in the NBA. There's no, I mean, who's he going to guard? I mean, he's not long enough. I mean, is he going to guard Kevin Durant? I don't. Yeah, he's going to have to. You know, his ball handling's got better too. He puts the ball in the court as a secondary ball handler. You know, I think there was a time in high school where people thought maybe he could be a point guard. I don't think that that's happening. But, you know, I think he's got to be a 2 if he wants to have an NBA career, and I think he can. But he's just not there yet. And I'm not saying he won't ever get there, like some people are. I'm not writing him off. I'm just saying I think there's some development that needs to be done here, and there's no need to kind of push fast forward on the kid.
Absolutely. I was thinking the same thing. That was like he got so much better at SC that people don't recognize. They only just watch the stats. But if you watch the game, he like I said, his ball handling. It's like he looks like physically like a point guard, but he plays like a 2. Yeah,
and he can, you know, he can defend multiple positions. It's so hard to talk about him online, especially because it's either you hate him or you love him. And there's no room for anybody to have any nuance and be like, hey, yeah, I think he might be an NBA player down the road. That's not an opinion you can have. You either have to say, there's no way this kid is ever good enough to play in the NBA, or he should be in the NBA right now. There's no in between that.
I agree. I absolutely agree. Another athlete I kind of want to bring up is Omaha Biliew from Iowa State. You know, he was a high-ranked kid for us as well, but
the highest
he was in
ranked signee in Iowa State history, Corey.
Absolutely
couldn't get on the floor.
I actually watched a couple of games with him, and I remember thinking, like, where is he? Like, why is he? Like, it felt like he, like, I think I watched the game really early on, so sometimes you have to give him some slack because he's a freshman, so he's trying to, there's a lot going on, like, because the game's more, like, technical and all that, but it felt like he, not handcuffed, but it felt kind of like that, where it's like he couldn't really just be Omaha, you know?
Well, he got himself on a team that outperformed expectations and was much better than everybody thought it would be. A. B, his offensive game has not grown to the extent in which I think a lot of people thought it would outside of 10 feet. But it's, he's a willing shooter, and it's starting to get there. The thing that's most encouraging is he kind of reminds me of where Khalil Ware was when he left Oregon last year and ended up in Indiana. Took a huge step forward, played sparingly at Oregon, then becomes a key piece to an Indiana team, and now he's looking like a first-round pick. Both of them in that way are similar when you look at their per 40s. If you look at a per 40 minutes for Omaha Biliew, it looks pretty good. It's 7 rebounds per 40 and the 12 points per 40, which is kind of how Ware projected when he was at Oregon. He moves over to Indiana, gets in a different system under an NBA coach, kind of fixes some motor issues that he had, and all of a sudden, first-round pick. I think you look at Biliew, and I think, the per 40 and kind of the issues that have plagued him at Iowa State kind of line up with that of Ware, to where if he finds himself in the right position, in the right system, this is a guy that could revive himself as an NBA prospect. He's got every physical tool.
Absolutely. Well, I have to ask you the same question. What are some possible schools you think could be a landing spot?
Man, anywhere for him.
Put you on the spot.
It's I have not reached out to any of his people yet, just because I've been so busy with the Calipari stuff. But he's also another high major player. He's a guy that I can see staying in the Midwest. I think that's part of why he went to Iowa State. The kid is named Omaha. He's from the Midwest. He played AAU basketball in the Midwest. So any one of those Big 10, Big 12 schools would be a good landing spot for him.
Yeah, he's such a good athlete that you're right. It's almost just like it's just a fit, honestly. I guess I'm gonna go off script here. I know we loosely talked about him a while back, but I want to bring up the Calipari news and the transfer portal yesterday. It was the forward, right?
Aaron Bradshaw.
Yeah, can we talk about him a little bit going into the portal? Maybe some landing spots. I mean, that was also another high-ranking kid and had a nice year.
He's from the Northeast, so never rule St. John's out of kids from New Jersey when Rick Pitino is over there. I mean, you never know. But he's kind of a modern. He's a high upside kid. He's another kid that's obviously not ready for the NBA right now, but he's a 7-footer that can shoot the ball, stretch the floor, is pretty darn good in the pick and roll game. And he was also hurt for the beginning of this year. So, when you look at guys and it's like, okay, he didn't exactly live up to his 5-star expectations. Well, he missed the beginning of his freshman season with an injury. He needs to add significant weight. He's still extremely skinny, but that's stuff that will come along. I think he's one that looks like he could take a giant jump between his freshman and sophomore year, depending on where he lands. And we could be talking about him as a potential draft pick at this time next year.
Absolutely. Basketball transfer portal heating up. It's always going to be busy, but I always have to bring in Rob Cassidy for all his experts' opinions and I'll just say predictions for maybe some future schools.
I gotta get out of here. I gotta walk my dog in a stroller. Time.
All right, Rob. Thanks for joining me. Go to Robbles.com for transfer portal, basketball rankings, recruits, and updates, and many much more. So thanks, Rob.
Thanks, Corey.